On the programme tonight, after CCTV emerges of the London schoolgirls heading to Syria, the Home Secretary promises to look at ways of preventing others making the same journey.
I'll be meeting and talking to the Transport Secretary to see if there are further arrangements that can be put in place to ensure that we don't see families facing the trauma and stress that these families are.
The race for a secondary school place as the number of applications reaches a record high. We'll reveal how many children in the capital got their first choice, also tonight.
I'm at Euston Station, where police have started an investigation into alleged racist behaviour by football fans on a train after yesterday's Wembley Cup final.
And honouring RAF Northolt, the Duke of Edinburgh helps mark the 100th anniversary of the airbase. Hello and welcome to BBC London News with me, Riz Latif. First tonight, tens of thousands of families in the capital have been finding out in the past hour or so that they've missed out on a place at the secondary school they wanted for this September. Almost a third, 32% of pupils didn't get their first choice, but 88% have been offered a place at one of their top three. This year there were more applications than ever, just over 84,000. That's up 4% on last year. It's putting unprecedented pressure on local councils to find school places for a growing population in London. Here's our education reporter, Mark Ashdown.
A few years ago, this school in Lambeth was just fields. Now it's an essential part of the education landscape, providing a few hundred of the thousands of new school places needed across London.
But we had the leader of the council.
The buck for finding places stops with local authorities, but this, like all new schools, is outside of council control. The head here, though, insists collaboration is the way forward.
What's really important is that those schools are talking to each other, and for me it's really important that the local authority is part of that conversation as well. If you're going to plan provision, there's got to be one local body that's able to have a look at the landscape, talk to the schools that are in the area, irrespective of whether they're academies or free schools or church schools, voluntary aided, and to be able to get an idea of where the expansions might happen.
And while parents lose sleep over their top choice of school, what keeps town planners up at night is actually creating enough places to cope. London needs 133,000 across the board over the next 3 years. Long term, the issue is, as always, money.
This year is all right. The funding is in place through to 16-17. We're then very worried across London because we don't know whether we'll have enough money to continue that growth. And of course, whilst the secondary schools now are going to be growing, the primary schools are still growing. So that's beginning to look like a real crunch point in a couple of years' time.
Much will depend then on the new government after the May election. For now, parents may be anxious over which school their child has been allocated, but fail to plug the obvious shortfall opening up year on year, and it won't be long before the promise of a place for every pupil becomes harder and harder to keep.
And Mark's here now. So how are parents reacting? I know this news has only just come out in the last hour or so.
Well, that's right, 5 o'clock this afternoon the emails came out, and earlier on here's a flavour of some of the discussions on the message boards around the internet. I'm dreading it, said one mum. So anxious, said another. Haven't slept for days, said one. Why can't this just be over? And then the internet sort of ground to a halt, really. And you can understand the anxiety out there, really, given this is 5 years of secondary education riding on this one moment. The Prime Minister David Cameron, I should say as well, also anxiously awaiting an email himself. Now the good news for parents, there will be some movement. Private schools haven't released their places yet, so some of those, that may change as kids take up those. And you can of course appeal, although you do have to have a very good reason. Now the bad news, this isn't going to get any easier over the coming years. London especially has a particular uncertainty over funding, over space, that's running out, and of course over politics. It rumbles on the opinions on which is the best type of school going forward. London, I must say, does have the best schools anywhere else in the country. With success, though, comes popularity. With popularity comes even more problems, as we saw there, how to guarantee every child a place.
Absolutely, yeah. An anxious day. Mark, thank you. Coming up later in the programme. A new look for the Queen as the latest portrait to appear on coins is revealed at the National Portrait Gallery. The last known footage of the 3 London schoolgirls believed to be on their way to Syria emerged yesterday. CCTV showed them waiting for a bus in Turkey. While speaking in the Commons today, the Home Secretary Theresa May promised to look at what can be done to prevent others intent on joining the so-called Islamic State from following their journey. Our Home Affairs correspondent Nick Beak reports.
3 schoolgirls from East London, now thought to be in Syria with the so-called Islamic State. It's feared they will never return. And there are still worrying questions about how Shamima Begum, Khadija Sultana and Amara Abbasi were allowed to get there.
They left on the Tuesday, but the Deputy Prime Minister of Turkey says that the Turkish authorities in Istanbul were not informed until 3 days later.
The Metropolitan Police has denied that charge, saying it told Turkish officials the day after the girls went missing. These pictures released over the weekend show them after they arrived in a snowy Istanbul. They waited at the bus station for 18 hours before taking the long journey to the Syrian border. They'd been allowed to fly from Gatwick, the same airport another pupil in their year had used to make the same trip in December.
This is an ongoing issue. That's why it is the case that Home Office officials have been talking to Turkish Airlines about these issues. I will be meeting and talking to the Transport Secretary to see if there are further arrangements that can be put in place to ensure that we don't see families facing the trauma and stress that these families are.
We're all shocked and deeply saddened by the news that 3 of our students have been reported missing from home.
The girls were pupils at Bethnal Green Academy. It's strongly denied it has a problem with radicalisation. But some are concerned whether enough's being done to protect other children at the school.
That recruitment is taking place through friendship groups and social media. So what training and support was given to the teachers and parents of other children at the Bethnal Green Academy to prevent further recruitment, grooming and radicalisation? And what community-led prevent programmes is the Home Office currently supporting in Bethnal Green?
The Home Secretary wouldn't be drawn on the specifics. Nearly 2 weeks after they left London, the girls' fate is unknown, and how best to stop others following in their footsteps is by no means clear. Nick Beak, BBC London News.
It was a weekend which saw 3 murders in the capital. A 15-year-old was stabbed to death cycling in Islington, while a man in his 40s and his 4-year-old daughter were found dead at their home in Notting Hill. The incidents have taken the murder rate to more than twice what it was a year ago. But the Deputy Mayor for Policing insists London is still a safe city. Caroline Hepker reports.
The face of knife crime in London, and it's young. 5 teenagers aged 13 to 19 years old have been killed in the capital just since the start of this year. 15-year-old Alan Cartwright died of a fatal stab wound while cycling with friends in Islington on Friday. Knife crime is a particular concern because it's been on the rise, up by 6% last year.
Any teenager that loses his life, a great concern in our capital. Now, teen homicides have dropped relatively low, and the Commissioner recognises that more can be done. We need to make sure that there's renewed efforts to take knives off our streets.
The overall murder rate in London has been coming down. Last year there were 91 homicides, the lowest in decades. But so far this year, 26 people have been murdered. In the same time last year, there were only 13 victims. Still, police say they have a 90 to 95% success rate in bringing perpetrators to justice. But this weekend has been particularly bad. The police discovered a man in his 40s and a 4-year-old girl dead in a house in Notting Hill. They have arrested 1 person in connection with the unexplained deaths.
It's one of the lowest murder rates of any global city on earth. In New York, they have 3 times the number of murders. And in this capital city, if you commit murder, you will be caught. The Met's clear-up rate solving murders is astonishingly high.
No one is sure why the number of murder victims across the capital has been so high since the start of this year, but it will be of great concern to the victims' families and the police. Caroline Hepker, BBC London News.
British Transport Police have launched an investigation into reports of racist and abusive behaviour by football fans on a train from London to Manchester. The alleged incident happened yesterday evening after Chelsea won the Capital One Cup final. Our sports reporter Sarah Orchard is at Euston Station with more details. Sarah.
Well, Riz, officers actually boarded a train at Stoke Station. It was a train that was travelling from here at London Euston to Manchester Piccadilly. And they boarded the train where they removed 4 individuals. 4 others actually left of their own accord. And that was following reports from passengers on the train that they'd been conducting both abusive and also upsetting behaviour. Racism has also been mentioned. Now, at the moment, the police are looking at CCTV footage, also mobile phone footage, as well as speaking to 2 witnesses to the incident.
And this may be the 4th high-profile incident in the last 2 weeks involving football fans, but sadly not necessarily a new occurrence.
Well, it does feel at the moment that these incidents are really in the public eye. However, speaking to the British Transport Police today, they did say they do deal with this on a weekly basis. Perhaps the thing that has changed is the public's confidence in using things like their mobile phones to actually record what they're seeing. And that's what the police really echoed today.
Well, this is the reality, you know. Our officers are dealing with this every weekend. What we've seen over the last few weeks is probably a raised profile.
Is this a weapon now in actually fighting back?
Well, it's a good way of capturing evidence, absolutely. And we've introduced some technological solutions where people can feel less vulnerable in telling us. You know, you can text us live on 61016. We'll respond, and officers have regularly intervened with services and arrested people who've committed crimes on the railway.
Well, just a reminder again of that number, 61016, if you do have information for the British Transport Police on that incident. But we are going to step away and look at another incident involving football fans at the weekend. This time it was Millwall football fans away at Rotherham at the weekend, and a number of fans tried to enter the home end and also go onto the pitch during the game. It caused police to put on riot gear to try and hold the Millwall fans back. Some of it did spill out outside, where it's understood that 2 stewards were injured, and also a car windscreen was smashed in that held a disabled man who was a home supporter. Millwall Football Club have said that they will help the police with all their inquiries. Back to you, Riz.
Sarah, thanks very much. Some of London's leading consultants have raised concerns about the safety of patients treated in private hospitals. More patients are being referred from the NHS to private clinics to help reduce waiting times and save money. But some consultants say lack of out-of-hours care is putting people's lives at risk. Emma North has more.
For many, private healthcare is seen as a way to get the treatment the NHS can't offer. But there's a growing amount of evidence that in some cases the opposite may well be the case. 73-year-old Alan was encouraged by his GP to have his hip replaced privately, but after the operation he wasn't given an anti-clotting injection that the other patients seemed to be getting. A week later he developed a deep vein thrombosis and he died. The family's lawyers say there aren't enough guidelines.
In NHS hospitals, people are very aware of what their responsibilities are, and there are very clear guidelines in place. That surety of what everyone should be doing has not necessarily been translated over into the private hospital setting.
Now the Centre for Health and Public Interest has published a report. It highlights the ways in which some private patients could be put at risk. Professor Colin Lays is one of its authors.
In any given year, about 200 patients die unexpectedly in private hospitals. Private hospitals, on the whole, don't take any patient who is a high risk. So why did these 200 people a year die?
Last year, a quarter of operations carried out in private hospitals were on NHS patients. With GPs being encouraged to refer more people for private treatment, some consultants say they want the system to be made safer.
In an emergency, it's much safer to be in the National Health Service because you have a backup of 2 layers of junior doctors to look after you and a battery of consultants from different disciplines who are all on call and willing to come in to help you. If something unusual happens, then it can have very serious consequences. The difficulty comes when there are emergency cases which occur particularly out of hours, when you don't have the fallback that you have on the NHS.
There are also calls for patients to be told more about the risks that could be associated with going private, so they can ultimately make the decision. Emma North, BBC London News.
Well, in a statement, the Association of Independent Healthcare Organisations said there's no greater risk in being treated in an independent hospital than in an NHS institution. It also says independent hospitals are regulated and inspected to exactly the same standards as their NHS counterparts by the Care Quality Commission, and when things go wrong, they report and act on them. And you can see more on that story on Inside Out London tonight at 7:30. That's here on BBC One. A demonstration by cyclists has been taking place in Victoria. It follows the death of a cyclist nearby, the fourth on the capital's roads this year. The 36-year-old died after a collision with a tipper truck on Victoria Street just over a week ago. Our transport correspondent Tom Edwards is there for us now. Tom.
Yeah, this is a vigil to commemorate the death of a cyclist. She died not far from here very recently. The mother of two, she died after being in collision with an HGV. She was the fourth cyclist to die in London this year, and what people are here for is they want more money to invest in cycling infrastructure. Let's speak to Donica McCartney from the campaign group Stop Killing Cyclists. Why are you here?
Well, we're here because most of the London boroughs are spending almost nothing on cycling. For example, Westminster Council has spent zero on protected cycle lanes over the last 5 years. And what we want is 10% of the budget spent on protecting people cycling to work and school.
Is that realistic in the current climate when councils' budgets are being cut?
We're not asking for more money to be spent on transport, we're asking for 10% of the existing budget to be spent on cycling. The idea that 24 boroughs spend nothing out of their transport budget over the last 4 years is a disgrace. All we want is 10% of the existing budget spent.
Some people say that changes are slowly happening in London, and I mean, what more do you want if changes are going to happen now anyway?
There is true. Transport for London is beginning to spend some money on its road infrastructure, but it only controls 5% of the roads. At the rate we're now improving, it will take 300 years to get us to the standard of Amsterdam. We can't afford that many deaths.
Do you think demonstrations like this are still having an impact? Do you think authorities are listening to you?
Well, we've around 4 or 5 boroughs have now adopted 20-mile-per-hour zones, so that's a start. But boroughs, central boroughs like Kensington, Chelsea, Southwark and Westminster now need to pull their finger out and start protecting people.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, we have spoken to Westminster Council. What they're saying is, so far, they are going to spend £1.6 million on cycling over the coming year, and they are supportive of cycling, but as you can see here, still a lot of pressure for more action. Riz.
Tom from Victoria, thank you. Still to come before 7. Captured on camera, the new exhibition showing a cultural snapshot of the experience of black people in Britain. The Duke of Edinburgh helped mark the centenary of RAF Northolt today. Prince Philip presented a new standard to the Royal Squadron, a military distinction awarded to reflect years of service and battle honours. The airfield is the only airbase still working today that played a role in the Battle of Britain during World War II. Sarah Harris reports.
It's known as the Royal Squadron, and taking the salute, the Duke of Edinburgh at the changing of number 32 Squadron standard. The flag is changed every 25 years to mark its heroic heritage, a proud day for its members at its home at RAF Northolt.
For us, it's also a shrine. So a shrine for the activities that have been completed over the last 99 years for the squadron. Most notably, celebrations of the Battle of Britain, which of course we're in the 75th year this year.
The whole squadron takes the air in under 4 minutes.
Preparing for the Second World War at RAF Northolt, number 32 Squadron went on during the Battle of Britain to be credited with the highest number of enemy aircraft shot down. Its links to the North London base strong for the best part of a century.
Northolt's consistently been at the forefront of the air defence of London. During the First World War, when the airbase is established, it plays a role in defending London against Zeppelin raids. During the Second World War, it defends London against German bombers and attacks. And of course, more recently in 2012, air defence was provided by Typhoons operating out of Northolt as part of the security plan for the Olympics.
Military missions all over the world still start on the runway at Northolt, strategically positioned around 10 miles from central London. It's 100 years since the first military flight arrived here at Northolt, making it the oldest RAF base in the country. And it's still very popular, with dozens of flights coming in and out of here every day. The history of RAF Northolt and 32 Squadron may stretch back 10 decades. But in protecting London, its job is seen in military circles to be as important as ever. Sarah Harris, BBC London News, Northolt.
Well, while the Duke of Edinburgh was busy at Northolt, the Queen was getting a makeover of sorts. A new portrait to be used on coins was unveiled this morning at the National Portrait Gallery. It's only the 5th time Her Majesty's image has been updated during her 63-year reign. Victoria Fritz reports.
17 years apart, but can you tell any difference? Here's what people in London made of the new Queen's head.
Yeah, it's nice.
Has she got the same crown?
Look, she's got a
different crown.
Slightly different crown, and she looks a bit sort of smoother.
And her earrings. She's got some earrings on in this one.
Yeah.
Little drops.
Which one do you prefer?
I quite like the new one. I think it's a better resemblance.
Me too.
The crown's more pronounced. Must be very heavy for an old lady to wear a crown like that, eh? Poor old thing.
This is a rare and significant moment in the history of British currency. There are only 4 previous designs of the Queen's head during her 63-year reign. The latest winning artwork was unveiled here at the National Portrait Gallery. 33-year-old Jodie Clark is the first Royal Mint engraver to win the coin portrait competition in over 100 years. He's also the first artist to use computer-aided design. Capturing the Queen's character proved the hardest task.
I want it to have a bit more of a warmer expression, almost a more positive look on the Queen's face.
Do you think she's going to like it?
She's approved the design the Queen has, so I can only assume that she likes it, and hope she likes it as much as I enjoyed the process of making it and modelling it.
So just how soon will we be able to get our hands on the new coins?
So we should be starting to see these in our pockets by towards the end of the year, so probably October time I'd start to look at. Some denominations will come out sooner than others, but by October we still start to see a nice flow of these coins come into circulation, hopefully not down the back of too many sofas.
Here at the Royal Mint in Wales, work has already begun, creating public art at its most widespread. Victoria Fritz, BBC London News.
Well, staying with art, music, fashion, racism and politics are just some of the themes explored in a new exhibition at the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton. It came about after the V&A, which holds the UK's national collection of art photography, realised it was lacking work by black artists and depicting the experiences of black people. Catherine Carpenter has been taking a look.
Lambeth and Brixton have been much in the news recently following the controversy that has raged over the immigration of West Indians to this country.
Brixton's growing diversity might have been headline news in the 50s, but much of the photographic work documenting British Caribbean life in London has gone largely unrecognised until now. To try and redress the balance, the Black Cultural Archives here in Brixton have been working with the Victoria and Albert Museum for the past 7 years, buying work by some of the most interesting and inspiring black photographers.
Well, these images come after a period of thinking about black people outside of the urban areas, so they're outside in the countryside area, rural areas, and sort of challenging some of those ideas that black people are only located in urban areas. I just hope that all of them people get to question their own assumptions around race, Englishness, history, archives, what's to be valued.
But if some of the images reveal their message slowly, others are shocking in their bluntness.
I mean, images like this one, if I didn't take it, they would say it didn't happen, it's not true. People believe camera. Whatever the cameraman took, it's true.
In many ways, the photographer has been part and parcel of the community, obviously, for many, many years, and capturing the nuances and the stories and the narratives of Black Britain. And so what we have here is an exhibition that helps us to kind of get an insight into that world.
The photos are complemented by other cultural artefacts and spoken testimonies by some of the artists and their subjects. It's all on display in Brixton for 6 months, with other parts of the collection at the V&A until the end of May. Catherine Carpenter, BBC London News.
Time now for a check on the weather with Wendy, who's here. Has spring sprung? And that's not easy to say.
It's not easy to say. Right. It's not easy to say whether it has yet, because yes, we're in March, we're in the spring months, of course, but it didn't feel very warm out there today, did it? However, as we go through this week, it is going to become a little milder and less breezy, because today it's quite a wind chill factor, and we're having gusts of 50 miles per hour. That was recorded at Gravesend, and it's got a very long sea track, the direction of this wind, so it's brought in a whole load of moisture, pushed them as showers across to us. Now, we haven't had the worst of them. Actually, we've had lots of beautiful sunshine. It seems to be a continuance of the winter that we've just had, which is probably going to be the sunniest on record. And as we go into the evening and overnight, there will be a mixture of clear sky and some bits and pieces of cloud moving through, still pushed in on that fairly strong west-southwesterly breeze. The temperature will fall quite close to freezing, especially outside of London and the urban areas. And so when we start to see these showers through in the early hours of the morning, just be aware there might be one or two icy patches, and they could fall as a little bit of sleet and perhaps even some snow for a time over high ground of the Downs and the Chilterns, but I don't think it will cause us too much trouble. Into tomorrow, very, very similar sorts of conditions really. Still that wind blowing, still beautiful sunshine out there, but from time to time we may just get one or two showers pushed over to our part of the world. And the temperature will be very, very similar again, 8 or 9 degrees, but feeling a good deal colder than that because we've still got the wind blowing. Even into Wednesday, actually, we are going to have that cold air with us, but there will be a little bit of a battle through Thursday. The milder air wins over, and it really starts to establish itself through Friday into the weekend as we draw in southwesterly winds, and that is going to lift the temperature to something that feels a little more spring-like to us. So on the outlook then, we do have a fairly chilly couple of days coming up, still with the risk of some showers and still with that cold breeze as well, but that will ease off as we go through Thursday and Friday because we've got high pressure building. So we'll have settled weather, temperatures probably in double figures, picking up day by day. Unfortunately, it may come with a good deal more cloud, and that's what we're going to chase around as the week goes on.
OK, Wendy, thanks very much. A quick reminder of the day's main headlines. A man and a woman have been arrested for the murder of Bristol teenager Becky Watts. The pair had originally been detained on suspicion of kidnapping the 16-year-old who went missing 11 days ago. The government is to investigate several schools whose former pupils have joined Islamic State fighters in Syria and Somalia. It comes as the former London head teacher of the man known as Jihadi John said he was not seen as a huge concern. And almost a third of London pupils have missed out on a place at the secondary school of their choice this September. This year saw a record number of applications, up 4% on last year. You can, of course, see more on the day's stories on our website at the usual address, and I'll be back later during the 10 o'clock news on BBC One. Until then, from all of us here, thanks very much for watching and do enjoy your evening. Bye for now.